All right. In case you're not familiar with Midwest Women's Herbal, we're a women-led and women-empowered organization, and we've been producing herbal and personal growth events for over 13 years. To find out more, visit midwestwomensherbal.com. We're delighted that you're on the call with us tonight for Mycoherbalism, working with herbs and mushrooms for health with Gina Rivers and Linda Conroy. And I want to introduce a few people. I've got Courtney Hanson. She will be your tech woman tonight. And if you have any glitches, have any questions, want to put something into the chat, Courtney will be handling that. You can send an email to herbwomen@gmail.com if you need to. And I know we have some other coordinators on the call. I see Karen. I know Willow said she was coming, and Michelle and Wynn. So there's some other women from the Midwest Women's Herbal team. You know, it takes a large group, a village of women to put these events together, and we're really grateful that they're all here. And we love to see you joining us tonight. All right. Let's see. Midwest Women's Herbal provides herbal education and opportunities for transformation. Oh, hang on, I got to back up a minute. I always get a little nervous, so bear with me. We like to begin our events by saying our vision and mission statement, and that's what I was launching into. So, the Midwest Women's Herbal Mission Statement says, Midwest Women's Herbal provides herbal education and opportunities for transformation. Immersed in the tradition of the village herbalist, grandmothers, mothers, daughters, sisters, and children gather in a co-created village. Through earth-centered healing and nourishment, we ally with the plants that grow around us from the ground up. We connect to weave ourselves, our families, and our communities into the dynamic spiral of health. Our vision statement says, we live in a world where the feminine is honored and respected, where women stand fully in their power, acknowledging their wisdom, skills, and innate healing abilities. You can always check out this information and reread these for yourself to really immerse yourself in what we want to convey on our website in the About Us section. In the coming days, we're going to send you some emails with some discounts. We'll send a recording, a replay of this event, and we have some really exciting news about the Herb Women Classroom, and that we'll be announcing in these follow-up emails. So we're really excited about something new that we're unveiling, and we want you all to read it. So be sure to check your spam, make sure things aren't going there. So let's see. I did want to touch base on the virtual learning that we do offer. So the Herb Women Classroom will be giving away tonight one of the modules, Fungal Fundamentals. We'll be giving a recording away for Gina. There's modules, past conference recordings. And we're uploading a lot of individual recordings too, so you can take a look at that. The other virtual series we have coming up is In Our Own Hands, Women's Winter Wellness Series. And that involves Linda will be talking, Gina will be talking. We'll have a little preview about hers tonight. We have Max Dashu on a previous call. And we have several other presenters, Sunny Savage. You can take a look at the In Our Own Hands portion on the website. Let's see, mushrooms. I was looking to see what kind of topics we would have on there, but you can check that out. Courtney's putting all of that in the chat. Let's see. We'd like to take this opportunity and thank our sponsors tonight. We have Moonwise Herbs, Herbs on the Side, Goodland Creative, the Driftless Folk School, Natural Awakenings Magazine, and Herb Farm. If you're interested in learning about sponsorship opportunities, please visit MidwestWomen'sHerbal.com. All right. And some of the big news that's coming out, or we've already announced it back in December, is the 14th annual Midwest Women's Herbal Conference. Registration is open. We have keynote speakers Robin Wall Kimmer, Gail Faith Edwards, and Dr. Cornelia Cho. There are pre-conferences. There's 3-hour pre-conferences, 2-hour immersions, 1-day intensives that you can start your journey earlier in the week. And those pre-conferences have a different pace than the main conference, and you can create your own mini retreat there. So be sure to take a look at that. We'll include links to these in our follow-up emails as well. Please keep your questions tonight in the chat focused on the topic at hand, and Linda and Gina will go ahead and talk about how they'll answer questions along the way. So So you have to stay at the end to have a chance to win some of those things I already mentioned that we're going to be giving away tonight. At this time, I would like to introduce Linda Conroy, visionary and founder of Midwest Women's Herbal and owner of Moonwise Herbs. Linda is a bioregional herbalist who's been practicing and teaching herbalism for over 30 years. She offers in-person and virtual herbal apprenticeships. I met Linda, 13 years ago when I first started attending the Midwest Women's Herbal Conference. I'm a past apprentice of hers. I've attended many of her workshops. So she has a wide variety of topics she covers. Check out moonwiseherbs.com for that information. And I know on behalf of the team, I would like to thank Linda for her unwavering support for us individually and her steadfast commitment to promoting women's health and well-being, her vision to create and hold containers, all of the containers that the Midwest Women's Herbal produces. So welcome, Linda.
Thank you, Shari, and thank you to the team. Thank you back to all of you for holding these spaces and continuing to help move all of our offerings forward. So, and welcome everyone. I'm delighted to have you all here and see you here this evening. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Not only do we run the Midwest Women's Herbal Conference, but we're going into our 9th year of holding Mycelium Mysteries, the Women's Mushroom Conference. And I'm so delighted to be here tonight with Gina, because Gina teaches for usually our herbal conference and our mushroom conference, and rarely do I actually get to sit and talk with her. So tonight, I'm super excited that I actually get to sit and talk with her, because she's certainly been an inspiration for me and an inspiration around Mycelium Mysteries, which started, like I said, 9 years ago. I was in the woods at the camp where we hold the herbal conference, and I couldn't step in the woods without stepping on a mushroom. And I just got the message, we need a women's mushroom conference. And so Gina was one of the first people who stepped up and offered to teach, and she's been doing so ever since. I want to read Gina's bio so I don't miss anything. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll just say a couple more words, and then we'll dive into actually a conversation. So Gina Rivers is an herbalist, formulator, and educator. Through her work with the world-renowned mycologist Paul Stamets, Gina has traveled internationally, educating practitioners and the public on the health benefits of medicinal mushrooms. She has served as a community herbalist throughout the Southeast and currently resides in the Blue Ridge Mountains. She founded River Seng Mycoherbalism in 2023, a holistic-based clinic serving clients nationwide. And one of the first times I ever heard the term mycoherbalist was when I saw Gina put that in her bio. And I would consider myself an amateur mycoherbalist. But I have for the past 9 years been incorporating mushrooms into my practice as well. And it's really a rich, dynamic journey. So that's what we're hoping to talk about tonight. And 2 things I wanted to mention to all of you is that when we do conversations like this or hold classes or workshops, we really can't dive into your personal health problems individually. If you have a question and it's a general question, we can answer those, but we really can't do consultations in these settings. So just to remind you of that, we have 56 people on the line. It'd be really hard to address everyone's individual concerns. And then, of course, we're providing this for educational purposes and not for prescriptive purposes. So we're not prescribing anything when we're going into this conversation. So with that, I would like to welcome in Gina Rivers. And I'm so delighted to be here with you, Gina, and having this conversation about what does it mean to be a mycoherbalist. So maybe that is where we should start, is defining that.
Absolutely. And it's really a term that I cobbled together when I realized that all of the work I was doing and the formulations I was working on always involved combining mushrooms and herbs together. And I think a lot of herbalists may be acquainted with mushrooms in some sort of distant way, or they may know that mushrooms are helpful for the immune system in some way. But in this country, we really don't have a lot of herbalists blending mushrooms and herbs together in formulas. And the fact of the matter is, mushrooms and herbs, they're from two different kingdoms. One's from the plant kingdom, the other's from the fungal kingdom. They have different chemistries, and very often they have complementary actions. So when you create a formula for a particular purpose or a particular person, it gives you more colors to paint with if you can incorporate mushrooms along with your tradition, whatever your tradition is. And so it is really my passion, not just using mushrooms and herbs together, but teaching other herbalists, whatever their tradition is, on how to bring in and incorporate these amazing organisms into their own personal traditions.
Well, I really think this is, a pioneering thing that's happening in the Western herbalism. And really I've been a practicing herbalist for 30 years. And the first 20 years, I'd learn one mushroom a year, and I was very cautious. And then a decade ago, when I had my own health problems, I was incorporating mushrooms into my personal life, and then started in my work, and then started the mushroom conference. And then it all came together for me to see that the mushrooms and the herbs and the plants and the trees are all, even in nature, are complementing each other. So why wouldn't you bring them in and complement them in this beautiful way?
Absolutely. That's a great observation, Linda. And it's true. I mean, mushrooms are the bridge. They are the guardians of the ecosystems, and the role they play even in the environment is worth learning about and knowing about, even if you never even intend on using, mushrooms and herbalism. They're fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And I think they want us to discover them. It's almost like they call out to us to discover them and talk about them and learn about them. And this consciousness has washed out now like a mycelial wave over the United States and really a large part of the Western world, that mushrooms can be so incredibly beneficial for your system. So it's been fun to be part of that big mycelial wave.
Yes, it is a wave, and it really has. I mean, it's a pioneering spirit that's happening, for sure. So, in that, would you be willing to share with us, just like when you first started getting hit by the wave, like what that was like for you, and maybe a story about, how you first connected with mushrooms directly?
Absolutely. I mean, I honestly, growing up, didn't think a lot about mushrooms. They were the slimy things in the can that I didn't like. My mother told me never to pick one up because it might poison me. So a lot of the the fear that people have, mycophobias, were sort of my background. And then when I began studying herbalism, I learned from many, many different Western herbalist teachers, uh, many of the same I'm sure you have as well. But there was this hole where mushrooms were really never mentioned. And if they were, it was in an immune health type setting, but it was never really delved into by any of my teachers that I had ever learned from. I was doing some consulting at a little store in Buckhead, Atlanta, right in the Atlanta area. And I also had an event that led me to look at mushrooms more closely. I had a dog that I raised since she'd been a little puppy, and she was 11 years old when she began popping out tumors all over her body. It was like overnight. She had 13 tumors, and I took her to the vet, and the vet said, your dog's geriatric at 11. And this type of dog, she was a cattle dog mix. They're very prone to cancers, very prone to tumors. And we can do chemo, but we wouldn't recommend it at her age. Well, my mind wasn't going there anyway. But I thought, gosh, there's got to be something out there. There's got to be something out there, that some studies, something that's been done. And so I started doing research on PubMed.gov, and I came across this very fascinating study that was done in 2004 on maitake. And it showed that maitake not only could bolster a canine's immune system to fight cancer, but also directly kill cancer cell lines. And I thought, oh, wow, I got to get my hands on maitake. And it just so happened one of the reps that came into the store represented a line that had maitake, and she wound up giving me some. And I put that into Morgana's food every day. And over the course of a year, well, it was around 10 months actually, 11 of those 13 tumors completely receded and went away. The 2 remaining ones I had taken her to the vet for checkup, and the vet could not believe her eyes. And she said, these 2 tumors are just hanging by a thread. There's no angiogenesis. There's no blood flow to the tumors. And she was able to remove them very easily in the office. And I kept my little dog, Morgana, until she was almost 17 years old. I got 5 more years out of her. And that instance, I had never seen a substance work so profoundly, a natural substance. And I thought, I have got to know more. I've got to know more. And at the time, the only mushroom company out there doing it was Host Defense. And so I would call them and talk to them and probably bug the heck out of them. But I also began studying on my own. I became very fascinated. I don't want to say obsessed, but very fascinated with learning about all of these different mushroom species that are used traditionally all the time in other countries. And so that's really what sort of began my journey to being a mycoherbalist.
You remember the first mushroom you've ever harvested?
Yes, I do. And it was just the plain, ubiquitous turkey tail. And in hindsight, it could have been a turkey tail lookalike. I'm not sure, because I wasn't really good at identification. You know, this was probably 15 years ago now. But I got so excited on a hike to find turkey tail. Turkey tail is probably the most researched medicinal mushroom out there, especially in the realm of cancer therapies.
Right.
So I was really excited to find turkey tail. I'll probably have a picture somewhere of me holding up.
Well, it's super abundant.
It's in all of our states. It's everywhere. It's yeah.
I was partly asking that, and I can see from your reaction when I think about the first mushroom I ever harvested, and when I think about taking people out and seeing them harvest mushrooms, your reaction is exactly what I see. Like there's some delight in finding a mushroom and seeing it and identifying it and having that connection and seeing it out in the wild, because the mushrooms, they're so magical. There's just something so unique about them. And the fruiting bodies, of course, is what we see. But then, sometimes we even get to see the mycelium if it's accessible, or if a log has fallen over. And it's just, there's so much magic there in connecting directly with the mushrooms.
I believe a lot of us have this visceral, primal attraction to mushrooms. And some of us, you can see it on people's faces. They're beshroomed. And if any of you ever come to Mycelium Mysteries, you see 200 women walking around with the same look on their faces, because we're all just so beshroomed over.
I love that term, beshroomed. What a great term.
Well, we are definitely part of the beshroomed. And I think I mentioned earlier, I think that visceral reaction goes both ways. There are some people, especially when I first started doing this and first started educating about mushrooms, some people would visibly recoil when you said mushrooms. They were scared. The mycophobia is real, right? And so I think this strong reaction either way is part of our body's recognition that we share so much in common with mushrooms. We share around 55% of our DNA with mushrooms. We only share around 15% with plants. So I think on some level, our cells know this, and that might affect our reaction.
Absolutely. And it's funny because when I started Mycelium Mysteries, I had the same reaction. Some of the coordinators said, well, I hate mushrooms. Why would we have a mushroom conference? And come to find out, most of them were thinking from the same perspective that you spoke about earlier, the little slimy canned mushroom. And I remember saying to people, I'm like, look, the mushrooms are life. Like, mushrooms literally are the foundation of life. So when you say you don't like mushrooms, basically you're saying you don't like life. And so we want to look at, mycoremediation, how the mushrooms have the capacity to clean up the environment, how mushrooms send out chemistry to other plants and trees that are in distress, and then that they can support, our health and the health of the environment. So I literally think when you say mushrooms, you're saying you don't like life. I saw somebody was asking you to repeat the DNA statistic.
55%. We share 55% of our DNA with the fungal kingdom. We have a lot in common with mushrooms. We inhale oxygen. Mushrooms breathe oxygen. They exhale carbon dioxide just like we do. Plants, of course, do just the opposite, thankfully, because they give us oxygen. They have melanin that if they're exposed to sunlight, a lot of mushrooms will darken up like chaga. That darkness in chaga is melanin, and it actually getting a tan like we can. They can make vitamin D from sunlight like we do. So there are there's a lot of similarities there.
And I'm fascinated with digestion and have a real strong belief that digestion is at the heart of our health and our immune system. And they digest their food similarly through enzymes. We do it inside, they do it outside, but it's, similar processes.
Absolutely. And now we're discovering almost all mushrooms that have been studied have been found to be selectively prebiotic to our good bacteria, our probiotic microbiome. So they help us create more of our acidophilus and more of our bifidobacterium. And some of them can actually inhibit growth of potential pathogens in the digestive tract. So they're pretty amazing.
I went to Mexico in August for a mushroom foray with the North American Mycological Association. And one of the things that fascinated me is that the people that we visited a couple villages, and they've been harvesting mushrooms in their wooded areas for generations. And one of the things that fascinated me, they were eating mushrooms that we typically wouldn't be eating, that people are hesitant to eat in other places. And one of the things that occurred to me, and I know I've heard Cornelia Cho speak about this in terms of certain cultures having certain enzymes that can break down mushrooms that wouldn't be developed in other people's digestive system because they weren't being exposed and they weren't needing those enzymes to break down the mushroom.
We've evolved out of making chitinase, and chitinase breaks down chitin, and that's what the cell walls of mushrooms are made up of. And I learned that too through Cornelia, is that the Korean people still make chitinase because they evolved alongside the ocean and ate shellfish, and shellfish are also, their exoskeleton is chitin. So it was very
and these were people in the mountains, so I think
really?
it would also have to do with if they kept eating the mushrooms.
Probably.
Because there's a big interruption in certain cultures, like, this part of North America where we are, that didn't continue to eat mushrooms.
Right.
And there's a gap in eating the mushrooms, especially fresh mushrooms that you would harvest and cook up yourself. And so, I think that it's fascinating that we, have that capacity. So we're talking about some pretty fascinating factoids about mushrooms. And I was wondering if you might share with us a couple of other things that you were surprised by as you've been learning about mushrooms, that you learned about them, that they have capacity for, or that they do out in the environment. Or
I think they continuously fascinate me. One of the most fascinating mushrooms is a very common mushroom called oyster mushroom. And oyster mushroom is really at the forefront of mycoremediation. That's using mushrooms to help clean up the environment. And the company I work with and have worked with for the last 10 years has spearheaded research initiatives to show that oyster mushrooms can, but right before your eyes, under time lapse, break down landfills quicker than anything else they know of, just by inoculating huge mounds of trash with oyster mycelium. That mycelium eats everything. And so it can just break down old dirty diapers and rubber and all kinds of things. It's amazing what it can break down. There's an initiative right now in the Puget Sound in Washington State where we have big floating booms of oyster mycelium, and that oyster mycelium breaks down the oil that's in the harbors that's left with that boats leave behind. So it's doing its job there. So oyster mushroom continues to fascinate me. I think health-wise too, when we talk about utilizing mushrooms functionally for our bodies, there's several species that stand out that seem to positively impact every system of the body. Reishi is one of those. The beautiful reishi mushroom, Ganoderma, any species really, they're all researched. Ganoderma lucidum is the most well-researched, but reishi seems to positively impact every single body system it's been studied with. And it's like overwhelmingly good for us in a balanced way. And so that always fascinates me as well about mushrooms, and the sheer tenacity of mushrooms. They can punch through asphalt and fruit in places you would never think possible.
I know when we're at Mycelium Mysteries, and every year there's a chicken of the woods mushroom or sulfur shelf that comes through the cement in the steps outside the dining hall.
Where it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be there.
It shouldn't be there.
Why is it protruding in cement? But I always say mushrooms are like pirates. They have guidelines. They don't have rules. They are the pirates out there.
Oh, I love that. Somebody was asking about the oysters, what variety or what species?
Oitis ostriatus, just your plain old oyster mushroom that's found in many, many states. It's really found over most of the eastern seaboard, very prolifically. But that's the one that's typically used because it's so common.
So that's another thing, I've been thinking a lot about, and I know we've talked about it at Mycelium Mysteries, is that, and it's certainly something we really don't know the answers to, but, we're seeing some mushrooms like golden oysters, for example, in this region that aren't native here, that are actually invasive and appear to grow faster and break down wood faster, and thus outcompete some of the native varieties of mushrooms. And I know Anne Pringle, who has a lab here in Madison, who studies this concept around the world, has spoken as well. And I'm wondering if you want to say a couple things about conservation and just some thoughtfulness about that.
Absolutely. And this will happen when an ecosystem is out of balance. Mushrooms are part of the ecosystem. And if it's not a mushroom, it's going to be another invasive species like mountain rose, or Japanese knotweed that we either intentionally or unintentionally put into the environment. And they're not supposed to be there. And so they see, nature abhors a vacuum. So if your native species, your biodiversity is not present as it should be and in balance, then you have invasives come in. And fungi, mushrooms can definitely be invasive. They can be pathogenic. Look at the honey mushroom. That's not something you want to see popping up all over your woods because it is considered a pathogenic mushroom, even though it's very delicious to pick and eat. It
Right.
can really do damage to an ecosystem if that ecosystem is out of balance. You don't really see this aggressive fungus come in and take control of an imbalanced ecosystem that has a good amount of different varieties of plants. And that's what I mean by biodiversity, and plants and other fungi, and really the animals too. It's all connected.
Yeah, but no, it is all connected.
Yeah.
So, since we're wanted to talk about mycoherbalism, and of course, we're get so excited about the mushrooms that the herbs or something. Sometimes I put to the side when I talk a lot about mushrooms, but I do want to talk a little bit about the reason to bring them together, like as an herbalist. What are some reasons that we would want to bring them together into our work and practice?
Well, many of the mushrooms that I teach about are mushrooms that have been used in traditional bodies of medicine, like traditional Chinese medicine, like Kampo, which is used in Japan and other Asian countries that are familiar with utilizing certain species of mushrooms. And as these mushrooms have been used throughout time, millennia in some cases, when you look at traditional Chinese medicine, their properties and their actions and their energetics have all been noted and observed. And so one scenario that I love to talk about, because most people are familiar with this mushroom and this herb, are lion's mane mushroom and ginkgo biloba. Most people are familiar with those. They know, oh, I want to take that if I want to help with my memory and cognition. And so even though we're talking about two different organisms, one is a plant, one is a mushroom, they both have terpenes that have been found to pass the blood-brain barrier and encourage blood flow to the brain, and also help with nerve growth factor in the body and brain-derived neurotrophic factor. These are all things our body does to make more brain cells, more nerve cells. And so although they're both terpenes, they're completely different molecularly. But when you put them together, they have this beautiful synergy where they work together a lot better than if you took just the simple by itself. So if you look at the different chemistries and find complementary chemistries, it can be very easy to say, oh, well, I'm making something for my memory and for focus. And of course, I want ginkgo in there. I might want gotu kola or some other herbs or rosemary, but I want to bring in lion's mane to complement this formula. And it makes the formula much more robust because you have all of these different complementary synergistic energies.
Somebody was asking you to repeat the name of the traditional Chinese mushroom that you mentioned before you started talking about ginkgo and lion's mane.
The one I mentioned at the beginning, maitake. Was that it?
No, there was one, and I don't remember what you said either. I know you mentioned mushroom.
Kampo. I see it from Isabel.
Yes.
Kampo.
Yes.
Kampo. It's the Japanese traditional medicine. It's also herbal and plant-based and mushroom-based. So you can find mushroom and
So
herb.
it's a formula that has mushrooms and plants in it. Is that what you're saying?
No. Kampo is the system of medicine in Japan. Their traditional medicine. Yeah. And I should know these formulas, but I am not a classically trained or traditional Chinese medicine trained herbalist, so I don't know their names because they're in their Chinese names, but there are several out there.
But that's the practice of
Right,
medicine in Japan. Okay,
right,
that makes
right.
sense. Yeah.
Tempo is.
Yeah. Gotcha. So as we're talking about combining plants and mushrooms and bringing them together, one of the things I was thinking about, actually I was thinking about this earlier today, is I often see mushrooms as being remediating or nourishing or supportive or tonifying, strengthening. And some of the plants, like even in the example with ginkgo or rosemary, they tend to be a little more stimulating, a little more poking, whereas lion's mane I see as being more like it kind of it seems to me it rounds out a formula where it takes it and it helps, like you're doing a little bit of poking, but then you've got the mushrooms to come in and really hold the body system. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
I do. I think they are overwhelmingly nourishing, to use a word that I know you're fond of. I think they are overwhelmingly nourishing to the body, and some of them have an affinity for certain systems of the body. Reishi is a good example. Reishi is an adaptogen, so it helps our bodies deal with stress on an ongoing basis. It helps really bring our body back into balance if it's not, and it doesn't matter what system is out of balance because all of the systems are connected. They're all working together. But reishi is beautiful for bringing a hyperactive system or an excited system back to a balanced state, a calm, balanced state. And learning mushrooms is just like learning the individual properties of different herbs, right? It takes a little bit of study. But they're worth getting to know. They're definitely worth getting to know. And then you can very quickly be able to identify certain mushrooms that might amplify your own personal wellness routine, or if you are creating something for your family members or your community, or even clinically, it's easy to be able to identify allies, mushroom allies that can complement your plant allies that you work with all of the time.
So I know you're going to be teaching mushrooms and herbs for women's health as part of our women's wellness series this winter. And I'm wondering if you might be able to, I know that's going to be a 3-hour deep dive, so we don't have time right now to go into the particulars, but I'm wondering if you might be able to just highlight some of the things that you're planning to talk about in that workshop.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is a workshop that I've been teaching it for a while, and I always add new stuff to it. So really the challenge is keeping it under 3 hours. But
I know 3 hours goes by really quickly.
It does. It really does. And so it really explores us, our bodies, as whole systems, whole people, whole women that change over time. We change through over time. We have different impacts from the environment. And so even though I'm teaching it from a holistic perspective, we will go through and discuss how to nourish your liver, how to benefit your digestion, look at bones, strengthening bones, balancing hormones. We will discuss negative or non-beneficial impacts that a lot of us cannot get away from. I spent a long time talking about environmental hormones and xenoestrogens and how they impact our health and our well-being. And we will explore very specific herbs and very specific mushrooms for all of these topics. If you've never taken a class from me, I'm a nut about anatomy and physiology. So if we're talking about a system, I do a really brief tutorial about the system so we all have context before we go into discussing imbalances or in whatever we're going to talk about that system. So I will present scientific studies, but also clinical experience and experiences of other clinicians, because I feel as an herbalist, both of those are very valid. You can't always look at things through that not narrow myopic view of science, but science will validate traditional use. And it also lets us know mechanism of action. How are these substances working in our bodies? So it really, I think, helps create a well-rounded perspective when we can also look at traditional use and back it up with scientific data as well.
Well, you're so good at that. I mean, I know you always say that you geek out, but it's just something you really bring those things together really, really well and set the stage for people. So I know we get lots of good feedback about your classes and workshops. One thing thinking about women's health and mushrooms is something that surprised me along the way is that they do have a direct impact on the endocrine system. And that's something I think I know even myself, like I'm just starting to like incorporate them for that purpose into my work where I wasn't before. I mean, the brain health stuff has been really clear, the immune system health, but the endocrine system, and I'm guessing you'll do some diving into the endocrine system in that workshop.
Yes, some high level diving, because when you get into endocrine, the endocrine system, you can spend days talking about it.
You can spend the whole time on that. Absolutely.
Yes, but they do. You're absolutely right. In fact, it's interesting that when mushrooms started being used in the Western world, and eaten more in the Western world, there was this observable action that they had that was never really talked about in Eastern traditions. And that was the impact that mushroom polysaccharides, or the sugars that are found specifically in mushrooms, have on our insulin cell receptors. And what they're finding is that most mushrooms help your body utilize insulin better. So mushrooms can be a great ally for people that struggle with metabolic issues in that way. So there's just it's still in its infancy. There's new science coming out all of the time about mushrooms, but it's interesting that we're seeing that they can be very helpful, because in the Western civilizations we have more of a problem with type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance and all of that. So we'll definitely talk a little about that too.
It's always interesting to me that we do like to hear about the studies and the research, and it affirms our experience. But, you know, when you look at some cultures, you know, like in Chinese medicine, they're not as concerned about that. They're utilizing conventional medicine, mushroom medicine, and herbal medicine all together, and not as you know, concerned about the particular reductionist, you know, because we're a lot of times we're reducing it, then we're putting it back together. Whereas I see a lot of that in other cultures where it's like, well, let's not fixate or worry too much about that. It's informative, but it's not the end all and be all.
Right. And they have such a holistic way of looking at the person in these cultures. You're not, you know, it's not all separate. You don't, you know, one organ isn't focused on. It's really the whole energy of the person. So it's very fascinating, definitely.
And one of the other things I think is interesting, and I when I was listening to one of your lectures, I heard you mention this as well, is that you know, there has been a lot of research done like through the National Institute of Health, but that isn't trickling down to practitioners in conventional medicine on mushrooms, particularly for cancer treatment. Right. And it really frustrates me sometimes, and I'm sure it probably frustrates you too, that information isn't being trickled down to the practitioners in the Western world, where in Chinese medicine it's right there. It's right, the practitioners are employing mushrooms right alongside conventional medicine.
Absolutely, it's standard practice in Japan, for instance, to use mushrooms right alongside chemo and radiation. And it doesn't deter the chemo, or it actually, in many instances, has been proven to help the chemo work better and become more targeted in its action. And it also mitigates some of those harmful side effects that we get when we go through these traditional therapies. Because ironically, hopefully the chemo's targeting the tumor or the cancer. It also targets the part of your immune system that looks for tumor in cancers. It's a sad irony. And people can be pronounced cancer-free, and then 3 years after treatment, it may pop back up in the body somewhere else. And that's because their own immune cells, their sentinel cells, aren't able to do their job because they've been injured by that treatment. So other countries have figured this out, and so they're using it as part of a whole program, not just, isolated on its own, but really using it as part of a whole protocol to promote health through those type of therapies.
And so it only makes sense, to eat a lot of mushrooms. That's kind of what my strategy has been for myself and my own health challenges that I had 10 years ago, is to eat a lot of mushrooms in my diet, make mushroom beverages all the time, drink them lavishly.
Yes.
Just make it a part of my daily life,
Absolutely. Put them in your tea like I did tonight. I was telling Reishi wound up in my tea. It didn't start that way, but it did wind up.
But it ended up there. Well, and reishi is so funny because it's so bitter, but if you mix it with that's where like the herbs really complement. Like I like reishi and turkey tail mixed with roasted chicory or roasted dandelion, and it makes it coffee-esque, and it cuts the bitter enough that it's not too overwhelming. So blending them. Do you have a favorite mushroom tea blend that you might like to share with everybody?
I have one that I made up recently, and it's reishi and lion's mane, and it's what wound its way into my mug tonight. Turmeric and ginger and cinnamon, and then I put some extra honey and lemon in there, and that's a nice warming all over body tonic for these cold days. So I hate to ever say I have a favorite because it changes depending on the season, depending on what's in my apothecary. But yeah, that's currently my favorite. But I have found that reishi does lend well to coffee and to chocolate. So it really disguises that bitter terpene taste.
The past couple of years, we've been doing the mushroom drink bar, the Mycelium Mysteries drink bar, and Shari had noted in the chat that she loves the drink bar. So actually, next year we might have to have Gina's.
That was a huge hit. Yes,
we could add that to our drink bar. That would be fun.
Yeah.
Because we always do add some new beverage to the drink bar. And speaking of which, one of the mushrooms that we actually found on a live bug when I was in Mexico was cordyceps.
Oh wow!
And that was so
on a live
exciting. It was real. Yep.
That's great.
That was so amazing to me to see that live and in person, and to really just get a purview of the real deal cordyceps, because I've purchased cordyceps dried, but I had never seen them actually growing. So I'm wondering if you have any comments. I know that's a very popular mushroom.
Oh yeah, we get them here in the Southeast on all kinds of like ants and moths and things like that. Cordyceps militaris is our cordyceps in North America. So it doesn't have to have a specific host. The one traditionally used was Cordyceps sinensis. This is the one from Tibet and Nepal that really isn't used anymore. because it is just the popularity of this mushroom has sort of devastated these fragile ecosystems where it can be found, and it's very specific. It requires cordyceps is entomopathogenic. You don't have to remember that, but what that means is it has to have a bug to grow on. It has to have some kind of insect. Cordyceps sinensis, the famous one, had to only have the ghost moth caterpillars that are only found in Tibet and Nepal. And the Chinese name for it is winterworm summergrass. It would inoculate that ghost moth in the winter, and when summer would come, it would pop up out of the grass. It was really popping out of the head of the ghost moth that had buried in the grass. But that's how they found them. And they're tiny. They're little tiny guys. So collecting enough to actually meet the demand of what the world wants became very problematic, and it damaged their ecosystems. And it's really sort of an at-risk species. Plus, we have to look at the decimation of the insect populations that have happened worldwide too. That could be scary for cordyceps as well. And then, of course, its very growth habits have inspired what was that HBO series, The Last Among Us? What was it? Some of you have seen it, where cordyceps jumps species and infects humans and makes them zombies. People are really fascinated
people
with
more
it.
afraid of mushrooms, right?
Yes, and I've had people ask me in all seriousness, I mean, this happened a couple of months ago. Somebody came up to me and said, "Are you sure it won't make me a zombie? Are you sure it won't grow in me?" And it's like, no, it doesn't jump hosts like that. It never has. But The Last of Us, yeah, thank you, Sherry. The Last of Us. If
Oh
you want
my
a
God.
good mushroom, something to make you mycophobic again, go watch that.
Oh gosh, no, don't do it. Well, I want to say something about that we haven't touched on, and I'll just say it briefly. And if you want to add anything, just for those of you who want to forage mushrooms, it's really as for me, when I finally got over my own phobia about being afraid about identifying the wrong mushroom, it's really about paying attention to detail and being very specific, and not ingesting anything you're not confident about, waiting until you're 100% confident that you've ID'd the right mushroom. Go on forays, get some good books, learn about them. Don't be in a hurry to eat them. They'll be there next year. Just really observe them, observing mushrooms, taking pictures of them, drawing them, getting to know and getting comfortable with them will make you confident, just for those of you who want to do some foraging. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Gina, but that just always seems important to me to say to people in terms of.
I wholeheartedly agree. Always be 100% certain. And I mean, I still will go out with mycologists and foragers that are a lot more adept than I am. I think I might be able to comfortably 100% identify maybe around 20 different species. So, I mean, that's not huge. And I'm always learning, I'm always growing. I learn at Mycelium Mysteries. I like to go on those forays when I'm not teaching. I'm in a student situation. But always be 100% before you ingest it. There are old mycologists. There are bold mycologists. There are no old, bold mycologists. To quote Paul.
And one of my favorite books, I don't know if you're familiar with this book, but it's called Start Mushrooming. And the author has given people a checklist for each month. He has what he calls the Safe Six, and he has a checklist that I think is a really good habit to get into, the things you want to look for when you're identifying mushrooms. And it's like a 6 or 7 checklist. And, of course, it's, habitat, does it have gills? Does it not have gills?
Right.
Spore print. And if you use that checklist, if you're starting out, I would, even if you're experienced, that getting that book, especially to get in the habit, no matter what mushroom you're identifying, of using a checklist and not missing any detail. And I think that's true about plants too, is that you want to make sure you notice every detail and that you don't skip over something because you don't know a term. Take it as an opportunity to learn the term, look it up, find out what the term is if it's in a book and you're not sure. So really, your first thing about going out foraging is really seeing yourself as learning and not, being overly confident in a way that's not, that would get you in trouble. So there were a couple other things. Somebody was asking about the flavor of mushroom drinks. And really, it varies because, in my experience, because it depends on what you pair with the mushroom and which mushroom you're utilizing. Like, I really like the roasted dandelion and chicory with reishi and turkey tail, and usually I put shiitake in there too because it tastes very coffee-esque. But what Gina's drinking would have a very different flavor. What's the flavor like of what you're drinking?
Well, really, I have such strong herbs in this, the turmeric and the ginger and the cinnamon. I don't taste any mushrooms at all. And you can disguise it, but you're absolutely right. Shiitake and reishi, they're earthy. They go really well with chicory and dandelion. But if you come over to the dark side, if you come to to the mushroom side, you start being adventurous and trying different mushrooms, edible mushrooms, and medicinal mushrooms, you'll notice that it's a very broad palette. They do not all taste the same, just like broccoli does not taste like potatoes, right? So they're very, very different. And they don't all taste like those slimy little guys that come in the can, for sure.
And being someone who I love to cook, and I've been cooking with wild foods for 30 years as an art form, and the flavors, bringing the flavors in. Like, we made 2 years ago, we made a cordyceps soda, and I just knew from sampling cordyceps that it would go really well as a soda, and it did. It just like really. It worked really well. The notes in it were really nice. So getting to know the mushrooms and your palate with them, you can be really creative.
Absolutely. We have to do that one at the mushroom bar too this year. I have to try that.
Yes. Well, last year, the soda I made, I used the candy cap mushrooms.
Oh, those are so delicious.
And that made a nice, sweetened the soda, and it was super delicious. So, but maybe we'll do both this year, cordyceps and.
Did you find the candy caps?
No, I purchased them. So that goes into, somebody was asking about when purchasing dried mushrooms. I like to try to find them and purchase them from people who harvest them in this country personally. I know, you certainly can purchase mushrooms harvested from other countries. I don't know if you have any comments about that. I just like local, and, I don't have any major concerns about getting mushrooms from other places, but I just like to harvest as close to home and locally as possible. But do you have any comments about that, Gina?
I really promoting your local cultivators. We are lucky that we have so many of them now popping up at farmers markets and people that really know what they're doing, even local foragers as well. If you find a trusted source, that's a gold mine. I would also be very apprehensive to buy mushrooms that have been imported from other countries. There have been instances where these mushrooms have been contaminated with lead and heavy metals. There's been instances where mushrooms were, especially cordyceps mushrooms, because they're a longer fruit body. They were seized at the border. They were found to have lead wires inside of them to keep the structure of the fruiting body more whole during shipping. That was many years ago, in the 90s, I believe. So it's just, I would definitely try to be, think more local with our foods in general, because it benefits, not just our own bodies from eating from our own environment and our own ecosystems. It benefits our communities that are providing these foods as well. So I'm a big fan of that.
Well, one thought I always have about this is that natural health is the fastest growing industry in the world. And so my impetus is one, to harvest as much as I can myself. I'm a little bit of a fanatic in that way. And then look right around me, like you said, at the farmers markets and the other people around me who are harvesting, who I can trust that they have knowledge. We actually have in the state of Wisconsin, they just 2 years ago started this course where you can become certified to be to show that you know how to identify mushrooms and make available for sale. And I think a lot of states are doing that so that we can be confident that the people who are selling us mushrooms in our locality are qualified and experienced in identification. And then, there's certainly lots of places. There's a couple places online where you can buy mushrooms from the states. And I think it's true about herbs, what you're saying. There's a lot of adulteration. There's a lot of unscrupulous things happening. So I tend to do that with herbs, food, and mushrooms, is buy as close to home as possible. And which best for the Midwest then, especially I'm in Illinois and not near a local wild area. So go to your farmers markets, look around even online, see if there's a farm near me that grows mushrooms. They grow lion's mane, shiitake, maitake. I mean, there's lots of people starting to grow them even in Illinois. Maybe connect with Shari. She may know some people because she's in Illinois as well. I'm not in Illinois. So maybe she might have some ideas and some other people from that area. Yes. So she says, yep, send me a message.
Awesome. Yes. Being in the community. Yes.
The networking, the mycelium that goes on.
Right. Absolutely.
So we have talked for close to an hour. So I'd like to just see if there are any lingering questions, number one, and then number two, see if there's any last things, Gina, that you'd like to impart to people about being a mycoherbalist and how that jazzes your world. So why don't you go ahead and share, and then if there are any other questions.
Absolutely. So I am thrilled that all of you are here with us tonight, just dipping your toe in. Some of you are already versed with this concept. You don't have to set out to be a practicing clinical herbalist or a community herbalist to learn about the benefits of mushrooms and herbs and using them together. This can benefit your own health, your own well-being, your own longevity. And I think that there's something for everyone in the course that I'm teaching for In Your Own Hands, or In Our Own Hands. And I think that it will enrich your life to learn more about the mushroom world. You don't have to eat them, but I do encourage you to try them if you haven't. Yeah, if you're somebody that likes to learn continuously, herbalism and mycoherbalism is a great subject matter to pursue, because we're learning new things all of the time about them. And I consider myself a lifelong student. And for my personality, I have to be challenged that way. I want to learn every day. So if you're like that, then come on over.
Okay, so we do have some questions. One thing, somebody was asking for book recommendations, and I'm wondering maybe if we can send that up in a follow-up email. If Gina, you might be able to just give us a couple different books that you would recommend rather than just spouting them off now, if we could send them in a follow-up email.
Yes. I'll send you some recommendations.
Okay. So we'll send that to everybody in a follow-up email after this, where we'll also send you a recording of this conversation. And then somebody was asking about foraging as it continues to grow, concerns you might have an impact on the ecosystem. What solutions, maybe an example like inoculated kits people can purchase. I know I have some thoughts about that. I'll just give out my thoughts and then you can go ahead and do yours. One is we're harvesting the fruiting bodies. So if we're harvesting the actual mushroom and not taking up the mycelium from the environment, and we understand that, it's like picking an apple from a tree. I'm not really concerned about people foraging mushrooms. I'm more concerned about people destroying the environment while they're doing that. I know there's this funny argument in the mushroom world about, do we pull the mushroom or do we cut it? And I'm a cutter because I don't want to disturb the mycelium. But some people think, agitating the mycelium gets it to grow more. So that's an interesting conversation. But ultimately, I think just knowing the growing patterns and harvesting only the fruiting bodies and being mindful about things like chaga, which is a different story. It grows on birch trees. There are people who cut down birch trees to get to chaga mushrooms. So there definitely are concerns there. So it depends on the mushroom, I think. I don't think inoculating with kits is necessarily the answer for all the mushrooms. I think mindfulness and awareness is really important. So those are just some of my thoughts on that topic.
Right. I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with you, Linda, especially, you were bringing up chaga. I get on a chaga high horse sometimes talking about it, and especially for the bioregion that most of you are in, chaga is pretty prolific, but it is also you're hacking out a sclerotia of that tree. If you harvest it, you're not harvesting the fruiting body. The part traditionally used is just hardened mycelium, so that can damage that organism. So there are concerns about over harvesting of chaga, but most of your mushrooms, not all of them. Remember, they're pirates. There's no rules, but the guidelines, most of your mushrooms, the fruiting body is just the reproductive organ. Depending on where that reproductive organ is, you want it to go ahead and sporulate. And that just means it's matured and it's released its spores. And that then it's like an apple. It's a fruit, like Linda said. So that's the only thing I would have to add to that. Now, if you are industrious and you want to have fresh lion's mane to cook with all the time, or oyster mushroom to cook with all the time, you can do the grow kits. There are reputable people out there that produce like little kitchen countertop kits where you can grow your own fruiting bodies. So that's worth exploring as well. And that also helps support your local mushroom cultivator if you can find someone bioregionally close to you to purchase from.
Just make sure you're growing in an area that you isolate from your home, because I have a friend who got really sick from breathing in spores, and she didn't realize that's why she was sick, and she was growing them, in an open area, a lot of them. So just be mindful that growing those kits isn't, breathing in mushroom spores is not really that healthy for you. So.
No, ideally that kit would have some kind of container over it to contain the spores.
That's just something I like to tell people.
Yeah, some people are highly reactive to spores as well. Absolutely. Yeah.
So this is going to be probably a really big conversation, so I'm not sure we can deeply get into it. But somebody was asking about, can you talk about the difference in powders, extractions, and mix of fruiting bodies and mycelium and supplements? And I know that's a big conversation that's happening. So maybe if you could say a couple words, or maybe refer to some resources, because I know we could talk about that for an hour probably.
I could, and keep in mind, I do work for a supplement company, so I don't want to say I'm coming at this from an angle that's totally objective. But I do also, my job is looking at the science behind utilizing different parts of the mushroom. We have to also remember a mushroom fruiting body is made from mycelium. Mycelium is made from hyphae. And most of that good stuff you want to get to in a mushroom is trapped within that hyphae, that fungal building block. So some companies, the way they prepare it is by utilizing the mycelium. Some companies utilize the substrate that the mycelium is grown in as well, because that mushroom has secreted enzymes and antioxidants and some antimicrobials, depending on the species, into that substrate. So some companies go that route. Some companies go the traditional route where they're only utilizing the fruiting body, but then they're extracting that fruiting body. And if it's in a liquid extract, then that's fine. But most of the time, if it's in a capsule or a powder, it's sprayed back onto a carrier. And so some people prefer it that way as well. So it's good to do your research and really learn about mushrooms and the mushroom life cycle. So I know that there's a lot of marketing out there that can be confusing. So really starting with sort of the facts and learning about the mushrooms is still going to be your best bet.
So somebody was asking about the oyster mushrooms and breaking down the toxic waste. Do we need to be cautious about consuming oysters? Do they absorb the toxins? So I think that's the last question that we'll take. Unless there's any other burning thing, but that seems like an important one.
It is. And mushrooms are really, really good at neutralizing toxins and cleaning up heavy metals in the environment. Unfortunately, they can also concentrate the heavy metals in their fruiting body and their mycelial mass as they do that. So that would not be my choice to eat a mushroom that was grown on a landfill or an oil spill. There are areas of the world that are learning how to grow mushrooms and utilize oyster mushrooms in their environments, in their communities that are eating mushrooms. They are using it as a food source. But these are in areas that where food is pretty scarce anyway. So if it's up to me, I would like to keep my mushrooms maybe remediating on that side and then have more of a cleaner source for edible and for supplements.
Yeah, I know there has been some research where they've shown that they've looked at the fruiting body and there was nothing there.
They do.
And
they have, but there's also been some research that shows it's concentrated lead and arsenic too. So I'm going to err on the side of caution.
No, me as well. But
that's why I phrased it that way, because there are some studies that show that they're so good at transmuting it, at transforming these toxins, that they neutralize them. So, but it's not it. I don't know. I think I'd rather be safe than sorry in that regard.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, but I still think it's fascinating that they have that capacity. All right. So I think that we're going to end there. And what a delightful, I think this is the longest, Gina, that we've had the opportunity to just talk. Yeah. And it's been such a delight. And I think I'll try to have a meal with you this year or two. So yeah, I would really appreciate that. And just want to acknowledge that you are in North Carolina, and that I know you've been hit hard in the past couple months, and just really want to send lots of hugs out to you and lots of care for I know a lot of stress. So thank you for being here and taking your time and to spend with us, and really looking forward to your class in February, I believe. Is it in February?
March 1st. I think it's
March 1st. Is it March 1st?
Yes. March 1st.
Okay, sorry. March 1st. And we'll be sending everybody a link and who would like to join us. So I'm going to actually turn everything back over to Shari, because she's going to do our giveaways. But I know a lot of people might want to just say a big thank you to Gina. And Gina, you can stick around for the giveaways or not, whichever you'd like. And just I know a lot of people are, I'm sure, grateful too for this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go feed my puppies. But thank you all. And I look forward to seeing you hopefully soon.
All right.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
Gina.
Care. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Gina. I always make so many great notes on these conversations. It's so interesting to me to blend the experiential part and the clinical part. And so I just love that. And I love hearing about the body systems too. One of our giveaways is a recording from Gina about medicinal mushrooms and immunity. So I think you're going to hear that beautiful blend of hearing about the immune system and then the different things you can do with medicinal mushrooms. And I noticed that's not part of our individual recordings that we've uploaded yet, but I've just got that on my priority list, and we'll be able to make that available to everybody for purchase when we send these follow-up emails. So let's see here. How about Linda Easley, Easley? Linda, send an email to herbwomen@gmail.com so we can send you a link. Linda Easley. All right. So that's the medicinal mushrooms and immunity with Gina Rivers recording. And I put in the chat earlier the fungal fundamentals from our Herb Women classroom, and we'll put that in our follow-up link too. There's a great talk by Rebecca Chandler and Sonia Horowitz about identifying mushrooms and the things that you might want to take with you to the field, basic ID practices, and then we have a fungal fundamentals part 2 if you want to follow up with that goes into deeper identification practices. And there's I can't remember how many recordings there's 7 or 8 for each package of that. So we are giving away one fungal fundamentals package. And let's see, how about Kiki Redhead? Kiki, oh, she's all excited and giving us a thumbs up there. Yay, she's cheering us on. Kiki, send an email to herbwomen@gmail.com so we can send you that link. And let's see. And then here's the big one. I kind of started slow and I'm ramping up to the big giveaway. So we have the In Our Own Hands Women's Wellness Series, and there are 6 speakers that'll be talking. It's every other Saturday for 3 hours. And so somebody is going to win this entire package. So let me see here. Random. Who do we give this to? Let's see. I've got Susanna Cardoso. Susanna, send an email to herbwomen@gmail.com so we can connect you with your fabulous win. And thank you everybody for attending. So fascinating to hear all of this. I really love some of these stories about Gina. I've been going to the conference for a number of years, as I've said, and it was interesting to hear how she got started. And that's one of the fascinating things. I think Linda has this great vision when we have these talks. I know Gina was excited to share some of her story, and the last time Max was excited because nobody are asking these women about some of these reasons why they're getting into things. And it was really unique to hear some of that last week. You can watch all of the replays for the community conversation at the Herb Women classroom. We'll follow up with all of those links, and stay tuned. We've got an exciting announcement. We don't want to share it just yet. We want to tease you a little bit. So look for these follow-up emails in the next 10 days, something really new. It's really going to be fabulous. And we look forward to seeing all of you soon at another event. Thank you everybody for coming tonight, and we'll see you at another event soon.
Thanks, everybody. And thank you, Shari, for hosting.
You're welcome.